Good evening. Could it be that the Conservative government's strategy to polish its image is to send cabinet ministers now traipsing across the country to say how wonderful they are? We'll give that a test tonight after Ted and the Rundown.
What injustices send people running post-haste to see BC's new ombudsman? Stephen Owen has been on the job for 6 months and is coming up with Webster. They're not Paul Hogan or Crocodile Dundee, but they are unofficial delegates from the land down under. Tonight, Webster has a laugh with 2 Australian comics, Los Trios Ringbarkus. But first, the battle for a park on South Moresby and logging Lyell Island and Windy Bay still rage on. Where does the federal government stand? In the studio with Webster, Tom McMillan, Federal Minister of Environment.
And he comes from PEI, and we've met once before. And before I get down to business, Mr. McMillan, don't you feel a bit shamefaced with the performance of your government, combined with the fact that you're now down to even lower than Trudeau was in the polls in '83, 22%? Are you not shamefaced?
I'm not shamefaced because I think the real indices that count are the unemployment figures, which are down, the interest rates, which are down, investor confidence, which is up.
What about the scandals? I'm talking about the scandals. Yeah. You're not 7 cabinet ministers, Roch LaSalle, resignation accepted today after that big party and whatnot and whatnot.
Yeah, but you know, in the case of Roch LaSalle, Jack, there's no case been proven by the media or by the courts or by anybody else, much less the opposition, that he was culpable. Here you have a guy who's well into his late 50s, if not 60s, who's got a heart problem, who's been besieged by every manner of accusation.
Hounded by the horrible media.
Hounded mercilessly.
Mercilessly hounded.
Right. And has said, I've had enough. A lot of people in the same position would say, I've had enough.
But even the Prime Minister in the famous Bissonnette case said that the odious and unacceptable conduct was bad enough for him to be fired.
Look, Jack, I'm not going to condone a genuine scandal or culpability. When somebody commits a crime or is perceived to do so, then the full force of the law should come down on that person. In the case of Roch LaSalle, no crime has been proven.
Do you feel, though, that cynicism is now a widespread disease among all Canadians? That we're so disappointed when we saw the shining new image of the Mulroney government, but sir, he said to Turner, you had an option in patronage. Do you think that we're all properly infected with cynicism and that we really want a whole new start on patronage and influence and contracts to France?
Jack, I think the federal government as an institution is almost by definition unpopular. I was 7 years old when the last majority government in Canada was able to succeed itself with a majority government. It's almost impossible in a country as regional as ours for a federal government to make any decision that's going to be popular right across the board. You make a decision as a federal cabinet minister and as a federal government that's popular in the Maritimes, and for the very reasons it's popular in the Maritimes, it's unpopular in, say, British Columbia.
And then you used the federal line just now, unemployment is down. Down where? Down in southern Ontario. We are up 13.1%. Economic disasters in British Columbia. Which brings me to the main point, and I'll put on my other hat. Is it not a fact that you are the man who has failed to save Lyell Island or South Moresby as a national park, despite the intense pressure from all the wealthy environmentalists in the east and the Haida in the west?
Oh, Jack, that's a lot of bull.
But you have failed.
It's a failure of society to save something that's very precious, that's valued not just by wealthy environmentalists, that's appreciated by all kinds of people who don't normally describe themselves as conservationists or environmentalists. I'm saying, as a minister responsible for the national park system, there's something special there in British Columbia. It should be saved, not just for British Columbians,
sure.
Not just for Canadians, but for citizens of the world and for citizens yet unborn.
And to blazes with the contracts, the pulp mills, the necessary logging, the necessary silviculture, while there's 650 square miles of untouched on the west coast that you can have for your national park.
Nonsense, nonsense. I'm not going to impose a national park on the good people of the Queen Charlottes or on the people of British Columbia. If they want to log, that's a decision that they need
It's
to make.
our decision.
Yeah, of
You'd
course.
agree to that?
Yeah.
Because you haven't got enough money in the till to pay us the economic value of these trees, have you?
No, I've said that we're prepared to put money on the table to buy out legitimate timber interests. If the British Columbia government appreciates, as I do, the value of saving that area for other than logging. But it's a question of negotiations. We're prepared to put our money where our mouth is and where our commitment is.
$10 million, maybe.
More than that. Today, I gave a check for $8 million to the government of British Columbia as a down payment on an outstanding bill of $25 million surrounding another park.
Pacific Rim
Yeah.
Park. That's been hanging fire for a long while. That's now finally been cleared away.
That's right. It was owing to BC by the federal government for 17 years. I thought that was outrageous. And I said, as a gesture of goodwill, look, I'm not going to deal with the province that way.
But you know, for the simple-minded people like myself, and I am simple, I started the whole business by going up there and standing on a stump and saying, let's give some jobs.
Yeah.
Lyell Island is not a natural heritage. It's been logged for what, between 40 and 70 years, depending on to whom you speak. Windy Bay Ecological Reserve, I'm assured by Kempf, the forest minister, will not be logged. Now, what's wrong with logging Lyell Island?
Well, Jack...
It's not in the park.
No, Jack, a lot of it has been logged, but much of it that is of great importance from an ecological and environmental point of view has not been logged. You asked me what's wrong with it.
Yeah,
Nothing
what's
is wrong
with it?
Nothing is wrong with it. That land is owned by the people of British Columbia, by the Haidas and by the Crown. Listen, no. And the loggers have every right to a living. I'm simply saying that if BC wants a national park, and it's for the government to decide, there has to be some minimum boundaries established. You know, its main appeal is its wilderness. You can't have a national park with a wilderness appeal, with wilderness side by side with clear-cut logging. It doesn't make sense.
Do you agree with the boundaries of the Wilderness Committee set up by Bennett it was, which allows logging on Lyell Island and in certain other areas, but preserves a lot of the untouched environmental stuff? Do you agree with their boundaries?
I said all along that the Wilderness Advisory Committee's boundaries were a good point of departure for discussions between the federal government and the province. I was in BC today to discuss that very matter with Stephen Rogers, my opposite number, the Minister of the Environment for BC. But I think the national park that would be a credit to BC and to Canada needs to be carved out in a way that people coming for a wilderness experience will not see all over the place clear-cut logging. That would offend them.
I know, but they were so bad, your environmental friends who could afford the fancy cruises in the 30 good days weather a year there is up there. They even objected to the whistles coming from the logging operations as, what did they call that, oral pollution.
Well, that's nonsense.
They did.
Yeah, look, it's not just 30 days of the year. People say that the Queen Charlottes are remote and the weather is lousy. And nobody will go there. The only people who will appreciate the area are some wild-eyed environmentalists. That is absolute and utter nonsense.
That's what I say.
Look at the Yukon is more remote geographically than the Queen Charlottes. The weather is much lousier. A lot of people would argue, who would ever go to the Yukon? And yet, tourism is the #1 industry in that jurisdiction.
I'll tell you a little confidential secret. The plan of the Social Credit government is to turn us all into a kind of Mexico where we sit and do scratch tickets for the lotteries, $350 million a year, and have gambling casinos. So maybe you're right. Maybe we will all finish up as service people for wealthy American tourists. And that ain't much of a prospect, is it?
I think you'll get a lot of people who are mainstream, who appreciate a wilderness experience and can value something very beautiful and distinctive.
Your friend Broadhead of the guy of Earthlife Canada and the Haidas, of course, are promising us more nasty confrontations on Lyell Island. Do you endorse nasty confrontations?
I don't endorse anything but reasonable negotiation between people who have some common ground. I'm here to find out whether there's any interest on the part of the BC government to establish a national park. I'm not here to force my hand or to force that of the federal governments. I'm simply here to discover whether there's sufficient grounds for us to proceed.
One other disassociated question. Have the Americans really cut our throats in acid rain, not coming through with the money? That's in the East. That's your problem.
Well, yeah, it's largely a problem for the 7 eastern provinces, Manitoba right through to Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland. They've let us down. Some people have said they've double-crossed us. Certainly, they've acted in bad faith, and they haven't honored the commitments they've made to us.
I think we've been double-crossed all the way on the lumber as well, and the shakes and the shingles and the bolts. Looks bad for trade with the States, doesn't it?
It's a people who are neighbors and friends,
And
but,
tough.
but with whom it's very difficult to be friends.
The Honourable Tom McMillan, Minister of Environment in the Mulroney government, the Conservative government in Ottawa, and he's going to take your phone calls after the break. You made some weather announcement today, too. I didn't read them. Anything important?
Yeah, a pretty important agreement between the federal government and the province to provide, from the atmospheric service that I operate out of my department, certain forest fire suppression-related matters.
Satellite stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Good stuff.
Go ahead to the minister.
Oh. Hello, Mr. Minister.
Yeah, how are you?
Oh, not too bad. Listen, why in the world would Roch LaSalle resign if he wasn't guilty?
Right on the topic. That's right. Go for the jugular on every occasion.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
Well, let me answer that. He could have embarrassed the government without being guilty because of what may have happened around him.
No, he has very serious heart problems, and
He's got a heart problem.
yeah, he had a serious heart attack some months ago. He's under a great deal of pressure and strain, and I understand that he packed it in largely for health reasons.
Fair enough. I don't want to talk about that. Now, I had my little nag at you, and I wanted to get people on about the Charlottes in South Moresby.
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Mr. McMillan. I'm 21 years old, and I'm scared, and I'm pretty mad as well. You know, I'm unemployed, and every time anybody's unemployed, you say, okay, well, we got to create jobs, and we create jobs to the detriment of the environment. We sacrifice our heritage, our.
Turn down your television sound.
What about problems like acid rain, ozone depletion? We can see we need fundamental changes, and the politicians and our leaders of our society now are failing to deal with these problems.
Yeah, well, it's a failure of society as a whole. You can't just put the blame on the politicians. In the case of acid rain, we're finding that emissions from industry are undermining agriculture, killing our lakes, destroying our fish, retarding forestry, mostly in Manitoba eastward, maybe not so much here in British Columbia, which goes to prove that environmental goals and economic ones are not mutually exclusive.
Is there any answer? Really? In the short run, there's no answer.
There are answers. People have to screw up their courage and do the things that are necessary to protect the environment and thereby protect the economy.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments, and I was just recently back in Ontario, and I noticed that there weren't very many parks back there, but boy, they sure got a good economy. And the other thing is, when I drove back across Canada, I noticed that the further west I went, the worse the roads got. And my question to the minister is, when is somebody going to take the step and give BC a little bit of boost and give us a return on all our tax money that we send out there to the east?
Well, that's a legitimate question. I come from a part of Canada, Atlantic Canada, that shares with BC now some common economic problems. Our unemployment rate in Prince Edward Island is 14 or 15%. In nearby Newfoundland, it's 20. Most of the economic growth in the country is tending to be concentrated in Ontario.
And as Conservatives, of course, you're against the expenditure of vast new debt for public works. You're all for the engines of small business to reshape the economy.
Well, I'm, as a member of the federal cabinet, in favor of promoting economic development right across the country. That's one of the reasons, for example, that the Mulroney government approved and then spent $1 billion for Western agriculture, mostly in the grain sector.
The wheat subsidies. Go ahead, please.
Mr. McMillan, have you ever been to Queen Charlotte Islands?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have been.
Have you spent any length of time there?
Well, I don't know what you mean by length of time. I toured it by helicopter for a full day, and I was told at the time by the guides that by seeing it by helicopter, I probably saw it more of the Queen Charlotte Islands than one would otherwise in 2 weeks.
Well, that's very good. I'm not going to be bitter about this. I spent 15 years up there as a superintendent foreman when I started. Most of the people in the Haida Nation that are making the waves right now work for me. I would suggest to you that if you've ever been out there in the bush, in the rain, and you're talking about South Moresby, how in the name of God, Jack Webster has already said this, and I didn't know he was that well informed. There is a very, very slim time you can get down to South Moresby. It is so wet and so cold and so rough. What the hell are we doing making a park out of it?
Well, look at the Prince Edward Island National Park operates for about 8 or 9 weeks of the year. Yet it's the cornerstone of the tourism industry in that province, which in turn is the #2 income earner in the entire province of Prince Edward
But he
Island.
was making another point, that when he was the superintendent of the logging company up there, many of your loggers were Haidas, right?
That is exactly right.
Many Haidas, for sheer economic necessity, work and support the logging. And some of us think it's a little bit of a propaganda campaign when they all turn up in their
Jack, I just want to say one thing more. I never, ever had better workers in my life.
Yeah.
But this isn't the point. This whole thing is just a crock. And when we get people coming out from the east and telling us what we should do out here, we need our heads read.
Thank you. Here's a protagonist in favor of Lyell Island and every tree in the world. Colleen McCrory of the Valhalla, what do you call it?
Valhalla Wilderness Society?
You got a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Okay, there's a number of points, and the first one I'd like to bring up, and the most important, is that the Canadian Constitution states that the existing rights and treaty rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada are hereby recognized and confirmed. At this time, the BC government is breaking the Constitution, and the very basis for the Haida land claim is the land on which they live, which is being logged and devastated right around...
Just a minute. We haven't time to go into the Constitution. You suggest we give the whole place back to the Haidas, the whole of the Charlottes. Is that right?
There's going to be jobs, Jack, and if you read The Sun last fall, there was an article by Glenn Bond in which he interviewed Bevan and all the loggers, and the loggers had all found jobs.
Listen, it's the minister we want to hear. Do you believe that we should right now unilaterally accept the interpretation of the Constitution as to existing rights, that would give the Haidas the Queen Charlotte?
No, look at Jack.
Oh, it isn't it?
Just a minute.
Yeah, Jack, look, I am not the Minister for Indian and Northern Affairs. I'm the minister responsible for the national parks. In that capacity, I am not trying to impose a national park on anyone, much less the good people of British Columbia. I'm simply saying that in response to growing interest in that possibility, I find it my obligation to come to BC and to see whether there's sufficient common ground with the government of BC to pursue the possibility.
Agreed. And people like myself get infuriated, of course, and many other working British Columbians, when they see the huge full-page ads in the Globe and Mail, would you raise, R-A-Z-E, the pyramids? All the wealthy environmentalists in the East.
Jack?
Yes, Colleen.
I'm an environmentalist and I'm a concerned citizen of British Columbia, and I would like to say that the government of this province is creating the confrontation on Lyell Island because as the Haidas were in court last year, there was an area on the north part of Graham Island that was available for the logging company.
Fair enough. I can't let you on all night in all the detail. It's the minister I want to hear from. Go ahead, please.
Well, Jack, the point is that woman, whom I don't know all that well, but of whom I know, whose reputation I know, is from the Queen Charlottes.
No, she lives in the Kootenays.
Well, she's from British Columbia in any
yes.
event. It's not a grand plot by Eastern Canada, Toronto, or the trendy liberals, or the wild-eyed environmentalists. This is a Main Street issue. There are all kinds of people, including from within British Columbia, who write to me, who tell me that this is precious, that there are resources there that ought to be saved. Now, nobody that I respect is saying that logging is, by definition, a criminal. Nobody is suggesting that the logging that's going on there is illegal. Nobody is saying that somehow the government of British Columbia is culpable because it has given some timber rights. Those of us who believe that there's a case to be made for a national park are simply saying, look, logging is valuable. There are economic opportunities attendant to logging, but parks values are important too. And there are also economic reasons for supporting a park because tourism could ring the cash register here in BC for a longer period of time than the logging that's going on in Lyell Island.
And I wouldn't disagree with the word you said, except that we always seem to be under the weight, where people are accusing you in the East of not exerting enough moral and financial pressure to make the government of BC change its mind. There was even a suggestion that you should get your cabinet to hold back transfer payments to BC until they bowed to your will, and you rejected that.
I said it was stupid.
Good.
I said that that's not the way the country operates. I said that I wouldn't even be inclined to consider withholding transfer payments and using the economic muscle of the federal government to make BC knuckle under, even if I could do it. Which I couldn't.
No.
I would think it anathema to what Canada's all about.
Of course it is. I'll take one more call. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I happen to be a resident of West Vancouver. I firmly and thoroughly believe that Lyell Island and Moresby should be saved. I think it's nothing but absolute utter criminality, including your opinion of the situation, to allow that marvelous place to be devastated. The only reason that lumber companies want it and not some other place is because there are larger trees and they're easier of access. Now that is the reason, and you know damn well it is.
Yes, ma'am, and I agree with you that's what it is. But there are also a number of tree farm licenses, billions of dollars invested, jobs dependent on them, and all my position, Mr. McMillan, is that I'm sure that there's lots of room for both properly done.
Well, there probably is. I'm simply saying that the boundaries that have been suggested to me by the government of BC do not meet some minimum requirements of what I consider the National Parks Act thrust.
But you're talking to them about it, and you may achieve it yet. And you're still prepared to buy out timber rights which are not yet committed.
I'm prepared to cost share with the BC government the timber rights that would be affected by the establishment of a national park.
And to accept your federal responsibility as part of the cabinet to pick up the tab for any cost of
Private
Indian
interest.
land claims.
That would have to be settled by my colleague, the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development, but we could establish a national park reserve without prejudice to either side in that connection.
Mr. McMillan, it's a pleasure to have you here. Nice to talk to a Tory.
Well, I've enjoyed being here. My mother's from British Columbia.
Oh, that makes you almost like John Turner. Well, best of luck in the polls. My thanks to Tom McMillan, Federal Minister of Environment. Next, we'll get the Ombudsman to fight my causes after the break. Once upon a time in British Columbia, not so long ago, when we created an ombudsman, it's not ombudsperson yet, that ombudsman by the name of Friedman was front and center, loud, fierce, issuing special reports. I can think of Shoal Island, Neptune, down in New Westminster, WCB special reports by the score, and he used the media as his method of attacking the situation and informing the public. After that, we had a very competent, crisp former deputy minister by the name of Peter Brzezowski, who filled in until came Stephen Owen, who took over your previous job before it was legal aid, was it not?
That's right.
Or Director of Legal Services?
That's right.
Director of Legal Services. How long have you been in the job now, Stephen?
5 months.
You haven't made a single solitary loud headline since you became Ombudsman.
Well, I think you have to look at what the purpose and objective of the office is. And the primary purpose is to get results for people who complain to us, bring their concerns to us, and also to get results for downstream people who might be affected by systems of government that are unfair if they're not corrected. We do not have a general responsibility, at least it's not a primary responsibility, to excite the public or provide the public with confrontational news. Now, there may be cases, and there will be cases, I have no illusions about it, where loud and fierceful argument on behalf of certain issues, fairness issues, has to be made, and it has to be made publicly.
Now, you have the right to make it publicly on more than merely your annual report to the legislature, do you not?
Yes, I can issue special reports to the legislature, or I have the authorization by the statute to speak out publicly in the public interest at any time. But that ability has to be measured very, very carefully, because when you get to the public stage, you've really reached a failure in the attempt to reason the government into changing its practices. A reasoning process, which is what we're involved with, we make recommendations based on our investigations and analysis of a situation, is a very powerful force. Publicity is a coercive force, and a coercive force is very weak because it has, by definition, a resistant force, and it also it can leave enduring bitterness, which can work to the disadvantage of people in the future who
You
run
must
up against the
confess
same
that after
situation.
5 years of warring in public by Friedman, we became used to the confrontational role, and it certainly seemed to jack the government up. You'll have to be careful, will you not, said he with respect, that you do your job, you don't do your job too quietly.
Well, I think
any
that's
major
true.
change that you bring about, we should know about.
Yes, I think that's so, and you will know about it through reports, annual reports and special reports. Now, we have a responsibility to get results for people, and I think we're doing that. What's interesting to note is that first of all, the number of complaints in British Columbia is, the incidence of complaints is the highest in the country of any province.
What
Now,
would it run about a month?
Runs about 1,000, 1,100 a month. Now, that's the highest in the country. It rose until about 1983 in British Columbia, after which it plateaued, and it's been gently rising ever since. So through Mr. Friedman or through Mr. Bazowski's terms that you've made reference to, there has been no appreciable difference in the number of complaints coming to us, nor in the resolution rate. Now, what that suggests to me is that the people of British Columbia generally know about the office and know what it can do, what it can't do, and how to get access to it.
Well, Friedman left 1,700 unsolved cases, I remember him saying at the time.
Well, at any given time, because of the volume coming through, there are many cases unsolved just because they're in the pipe.
All right, what is the most common occasion, the most common subject in which you are called in as the Ombudsman and find it necessary to make investigations?
Well, the most common areas are those areas where the government is involved fundamentally in people's lives, the important things in people's lives, like their livelihood, like their health, like their safety, like their...
You've got to break it down.
Sure.
You're talking about compensation cases.
Workers' compensation, obviously, people's safety and health and livelihood. Social assistance cases where people's sustenance is dependent on the government. Correctional institution cases where people's liberty is involved.
Give me a sample of a correctional institutional case.
Well, there may be a situation where someone claims that they've been beaten up by a prison guard.
You'll do that?
We'll do that.
Not the police?
No, we'll do that. There is also an internal inspections and standards branch of section of the corrections branch that deals with those, but we deal with them as well.
But your area is still restricted. You can't, for instance, take medical complaints.
Well, we can. We take complaints against the medical services plan. We are involved in some complaints against hospitals, some hospitals that come within our jurisdiction.
Treatment complaints?
No, not against doctors directly. The professions, lawyers, doctors, architects, are listed in a schedule to our Act, but that section has not been proclaimed yet.
So that's a pity. Don't you think they should proclaim the lawyers especially, so that people with unhappy about the lawyers, can go straight to you?
Well, we actually have an informal arrangement with the Law Society where we will receive complaints and review their handling of it. Now, the difficulty with lawyers and police officers and doctors and anyone in a closed group in society is that they investigate themselves. They happen to have a great deal of pride usually and investigate rigorously, but the information is kept confidential often from the public. The public doesn't accept their vindication of themselves.
No, it doesn't.
So the Office of the Ombudsman can be very effective in that. We can go in, protect the confidences, but provide an independent review and then give the public the confidence
But if
of our
somebody gets
report.
beaten up in the city jail and nobody can find out who did it, although there were a number of men on shift, I'm not talking about the current case, I'm just using it as an example.
Sure.
You could move in on that.
Well, I think we can. We've made an arrangement with the BC Police Commission to receive complaints and to monitor their investigation of it and to go in and conduct our own investigation where the complainant remains unsatisfied with that process.
Yeah, but you've got an informal arrangement with the lawyers, but no informal arrangement with doctors. You don't need that. They've got their own disciplinary procedures.
Well, so do lawyers, but the trouble is that the public isn't often or is often not satisfied with their own vindication.
Don't you think that they should be fully open to your scrutiny?
I think so. I think the same principles that apply to provincial government ministries apply to doctors or lawyers or municipalities.
You have access to any injustices which might be a matter of a commercial transaction through the government and crown corporations.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But mostly nowadays the complaints are minor.
Well, no, they're not minor at all. We have many major ones underway, but they are systematically being resolved, as they were in the past. There are only very few that get to the confrontational stage where there's a difference of opinion and they can't be resolved.
Well, I'll tell you, before Ombudsman was invented, people like myself over many years, we acted as unofficial ombudsman, taking the complaints, and you've certainly taken away a lot of our meat, I don't mind telling you. Calls to the Ombudsman, Stephen Owen. How long have you been in now? 6 months?
5.5 months.
5.5 months. After the break. Stephen Owen is the Ombudsman. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just wondering, like 15 years ago, I was picked up for impaired driving. And I was just wondering, is there anything that I can do, like, about my situation? Mentally, I've been, I haven't got the confidence as what I used to be.
Just a minute. Do you want your record cleared or do you want treatment?
What I wanted to know is to get, oh, great. Like, I just want to know if I can do something with my mental...
No.
Well, one way I think you can deal with it is to apply to the Solicitor General of Canada for a pardon. And that can seal your record. It doesn't remove the record, but it seals it from inquiry by anyone on the outside.
Does that apply to any criminal record?
Yes, it does. There are different time limits involved depending on the seriousness of the crime, and an inquiry is done of the person's situation now and whether they've been in trouble again and
Does
whether
that
they're
mean if I apply for a job, I don't have to fill in criminal record?
Well, that's, no, I think it depends on how it's worded. If it asks specifically whether you have a criminal record, you would have to answer, but it may be that the type of job you're applying for has no relevance to your criminal record, and then it would be an improper question.
That's a good answer. I've often wondered about that. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Owen.
Yes, sir.
I'm dealing with your Pat Anderson, and I went to the compensation board today. I have a claim in there about since
1975, and I had an appeal, and I won the appeal.
Yes.
I went in today to see Mr. Bradshaw to get my pension increased, okay?
Yes.
And they told me today that Mr. Bradshaw is going to Michigan next week, so there'll be another delay on this thing. I would like somebody to have a look into this system of the WCB.
Well, in fact, our office is involved in a major study of the claims and appeals procedures of the WCB right at this moment. We will have our, excuse me, our report finished within 2 months, and that will be made public. We've been invited by Mr. Nielsen, the new chairman of the WCB, to do an independent and neutral external review of that appeals system, and we're hopeful that that will have play a major part in the internal review and statutory or other procedural changes that are made to that system.
And he should call the guy he's working with on his case just now in your office about his other complications.
Certainly. Delay is the greatest problem in the workers' compensation system, and it's an extremely important element of fairness itself, is that things be done on a timely basis.
Here, go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Oh yes, I've been kidnapped shortly after the Johnson-Bentley murder cases, and
well, hold on.
This is the Wells Park.
Yeah, the one up in Clearwater. What's your point?
And so far, I managed to escape that at the time. Made a report to the Port Coquitlam RCMP.
No, you'll have to turn down your television sound, and then I'll come back to you in a little while. Gives instant paranoia if you leave the television sound up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I was in a plane crash in 1980 coming out of Rivers Inlet at Port Hardy. I phoned you after it happened and told you I was having some trouble with the Workmen's Compensation Board. And anyway, I was dealing with the Ombudsman office last year, and the Workmen's Compensation Board just shoved the whole thing under the rug. And I was seriously and still have injuries from this. Anyway, I was dealing with the Ombudsman office, and they said they wrote to the Workmen's Compensation Board, and the Workmen's Compensation Board wrote back and said, well, he has an appeal, so you can't use the Ombudsman system. So after they sent me that letter, I called the Workmen's Compensation Board, got in touch with them and said, well, I'd like to go through this and see what I can do. And they said, well, you have no recourse, you see. So they got me in a catch-22.
Oh, just a minute. He wants to know at what stage you can move into a compensation case.
Well, as a general principle, the Ombudsman's office cannot get involved until someone has exhausted their internal appeals in any system
in any
of government.
Given situation.
Yes, but if there's procedural unfairness along the way, we can become involved at an earlier stage. And in this type of situation, where there's delay in particular, we will have a look and see if we can get the matter expedited. But once a decision is made, if the decision isn't agreed with, then we can get involved.
Go ahead, please.
I just want to praise the Ombudsman's office and Pat Anderson in particular. I think that the Ombudsman's office does a tremendous job, and like I say, that this Miss Pat Anderson that works there, did a fabulous job for me, and I just wish to praise him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
An unusual kind of call, but pleasant to get. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack. If I'm a person applying for a federal position, how would I know if I was being discriminated upon, in spite of if I had the valid qualifications and experience?
You mean you entered a contract and lost a job? You entered a contest and lost a job?
Hypothetically, okay?
Yes.
I'm not at that point yet, but I was just venturing how would I know?
Well, the provincial ombudsman deals with provincial matters, but I think the situation is fairly similar. You have a right to appeal an adverse employment decision to the Public Service Commission in British Columbia, and I assume that there's a similar provision with the federal government.
Do you deal with discrimination as such?
Well, if it comes within the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Code, then we will refer them to there, and we will monitor the Human Rights Council.
If they get squared away in front of human rights, that's all right.
That's
but
fine.
If they don't, they can come to you.
That's right.
But you won't interfere unless there's something patently unreasonable or great delay in the action of the Provincial Human Rights Council.
Well, in the process, we'll watch that process to ensure that it's fair, yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hello, Jack. Hello, Mr. Ombudsman. My complaint is with the Hospital Employee Union. I was an employee there at the time they were reclassifying the system. This is between 80, I think they finished it up in about 83 or so.
Yes.
And during the whole time I was working there, I was making, say, 750 plus X, which is to be determined at a later date. as to how much I was going to get as a reclassification. Now, all the people, I changed various jobs from casual to permanent, part-time, etc. And at the end of it, when they finally came around to reclassifying us, all the people I was working with got a lot of money. They told me I owed them money because at the beginning I should have been making less money, and it all worked out. I was wondering if there's anything that could be done with that through your office there.
Well, with the Hospital Employees Union, you do have a union representing your interests in their negotiations with government. If you're not happy with resolution by your union of your particular reclassification, you would have recourse to the Labor Relations Board under Section 7 of that Act.
I kind of thought I got sold out by them in a bit of a package, you know.
But just a minute, maybe you were sold out, but if the Labor Relations Board has handled it, you can't touch it.
Right.
Well, we review the procedures of and the practices of the Labor Relations Board as well, but we would have to see a person go through that process and test it.
Would you recommend that I take this through and just check it out?
Well, I don't know the details of your case, but that would be your avenue for redress.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack. I would like to know, please, what a family of 4, 2 parents working, minimum wage, what they can do when they cannot find a place to live.
Do they come to the Ombudsman?
No, they have not. This is why I'm inquiring.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you are working, and you know, I don't think there's anything that the Ombudsman's office could do with respect to, it's only if there are rights or responsibilities of the provincial government that we could oversee to make sure you were being treated fairly with respect to them.
This couple right now are living in a home that costs them $700 a month and they cannot afford it. They've been given their notice.
Well, that's a common economic problem, isn't it?
Right.
Yes. Well, I think it raises a good point, though, with respect to the Ombudsman's office. We have a very focused role, and that is to look after procedural fairness in the public service. And I think if we try and go beyond that into political issues and social and economic issues, which are of vital importance, but are outside of our focus, then we lose the impact of the work we can do.
The fact remains is that if anybody has a problem, all they have to do is to phone you and you'll send them to the right place.
Well, that's right. One of the most valuable services I think we provide, and about half the cases we deal with are giving advice and referral information to people to the appropriate place where they can get a solution.
Well, my thanks. When do you do your first annual report?
It should come out in about 6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks. We'll watch it with interest. My thanks to Stephen Owen, the Ombudsman. Next, I'm going to learn how to speak Australian after the break.
This is Steve and Neill for Expo 86 Welcomes the World. And here we are at the Australian Pavilion, and we're going to ask a few people about what they think it is. So let's go this way. Actually, there are lots of koalas and kangaroos for sale here, but in Australia we don't kill them. In fact, we just line them up and then we go boo. That's right. Sorry.
I've been told that these two guys were a riot at Expo 86. Strangest couple. One looks like a shabby punk, and the other one looks like a tall fir tree. They are Los Trios Ringbarkers. Now, which is which? What's your name?
I'm Neill, Mr. Webster.
Neill what?
Neill Gladwin.
And I'm the shabby punk.
You're the shabby punk.
But I thought you were going to be that short little black kid, you know, running around. We're going to be
Webster.
in a wacky sitcom situation.
If I get down there.
Right.
I've got to say, Jack, that you got a lovely office here.
Which office?
This one here. It's great.
It's a studio.
It was a joke. It was an Australian joke.
Oh, I see. Oh, that was a joke. Anyway, I wanted to make me laugh, and perhaps the best way we can do it. What did you do at Expo 86, by the way?
Well, we actually did a show at the Flying Club. That's the comedy club, which had a crashed B-52, it looked like, through the ceiling. And then we performed another show at the Vancouver East Cultural Centre.
Mm-hmm. Way out there.
Do you believe that?
I find it hard to believe that you were a riot so far during this program. Maybe we could do something. I'm a great... go on.
You're not that interesting, really. I mean, you know, you've been on television for years and years and years, haven't you?
Thousands of years.
Thousands.
Thousands of years.
Now, what? I mean, we've just been on for a few minutes. You know.
But normally you do mime.
That's right.
We'll do some mime.
Okay,
well, we can't do. We do a visual comedy act.
So Stephen could do an impression for you if you like.
Do an impression.
And this is an early one we used to do. It's
this is an impression of of a codfish.
A codfish. You know what a codfish is. Yeah. So I just warm up the face.
Yeah, it's a good warm up the face. This is a very dangerous and delicate routine, Jack.
That's a very good impression of a codfish.
Well, thank you. Well,
thank you. Can you do one?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to do one.
Oh, you've got the jowls for it. You see, that's what I'm trying to develop.
Yeah,
as I mature.
And you will.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
You got me on that.
Now, you're both drama teachers.
Yes, we're actually qualified to look after children.
Oh, God help the children. It says here that you set out to alienate the audience, no middle ground, and people either stay and laugh or get out.
And we're all for logging.
You're all for logging
You bet.
On Lyell Island.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a great admirer of all things Australian, but
Yes.
I want you to teach me the accent.
Well, what you've got to do is not move your top lip.
Yeah.
No,
and don't move your jaw and talk through your nose.
Just like that little fella, that tiny little film star, Paul Hogan.
Paul Hagen.
That's right.
Paul Hagen.
Actually, we'd like to disassociate ourselves from any people out there who think that we may be, in fact, disciples of Paul Hogan. There are no bathing costumes in our show.
And he's very big on beer. Where do you come from in Australia?
Melbourne.
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 Melbourne, yes. Well, I've been on the beach in Melbourne with beer beside me in the sand.
Yeah.
And I always remember it had a little old country type circular railway, right? Suburban rail tracks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Jack. Yeah.
We have horses, but you know.
And you had free lunch in the pubs.
That's right.
Free lunch.
Free lunch in the pubs.
right.
There was gold on the street, wasn't there?
And kangaroos in everyone's backyards.
No, I didn't see a single solitary kangaroo in all the time I was in Australia.
How did you get on there with your thick Canadian accent?
I got on very well because half the people seemed to come from Scotland originally anyway, although most of your people were English convicts, weren't they?
That's right. I think we had a few Irish thrown in there too.
Few Irish, not that
A few
many
political
Scots.
prisoners, perhaps, I think.
And then I did a couple of talk shows in Sydney, 2UE. Is that
2UE?
right?
Yeah,
It's a
that's
radio
right.
station.
It was a television talk show I did the last time I was in Australia.
It might have been a radio station then. No, I don't know.
No, it was a television station.
Okay, it's television.
Television. All right. You did the big league.
Okay, what about your shillers? Have you both got shillers?
What's the shilling?
What's a
Shiller.
shiller?
Shillers.
Shiller.
Oh, women.
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 And we call them, we're part of the young alternative generation.
That calls women women.
Women. And we have ombudspersons there too.
You have, eh? You've got shillers and you've got mites.
Mites?
Yeah.
What? Like?
Mate.
Mates.
Oh, mates.
Oh, mates. Sorry.
The whole object of the exercise was to try and teach me the Australian language, and here you're speaking English.
What?
We speak better English than you do. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we've been to Scotland. We've been there a couple of times.
Yeah, we played the Edinburgh Festival.
Did you?
Yeah. Actually, we did this a bit in the show where we get an audience volunteer to come up on stage, and this guy was a huge Scot that got up and put Stephen in a headlock, and then I had to sort of fill in, and this guy
Neil
came
was
up.
apologising while he was trying to rip my head off. You know, these Scottish
I know
people.
what the
They
Scots are like.
They like to get in.
Friendly
Oh
fun.
no, the Edinburgh Festival would be very good, and you bought a kilt when you were in Scotland, of course, and probably wear it to this day.
Well, you know.
Only on Monday nights at a special club I go to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
San
not quite
Francisco.
sure yet what you do on the stage at the New York Theatre, February 24th in Vancouver.
Well, you haven't asked us.
Tell me.
All right.
Well, what we do is we do a show that involves.
Never mind, I'm looking off the set.
Sorry. Oh, we do a show that involves a lot of different things. It's been called New Vaudeville, and it's been called Schmashstick. And what's that? And we played two naive, inept characters come out and just can't do anything right.
So I can see tonight, by the way, there's something wrong with your tongue.
Nothing wrong with my tongue. Can we
But
say that
we can't talk about that on television.
No. Tell me a joke.
Tell you a joke.
I've never died so thoroughly for 6.5 minutes in all my life. Tell me a joke.
We'll tell you a mime joke.
A mime joke. Okay, give me a mime joke.
How do you like it so far?
Punchline's coming up, Jay.
Yeah, where's the punchline?
You're it.
That's the punchline.
You got it.
Okay, gentlemen, my thanks to Neill, Gladwin, and
Thanks.
Stephen Kearney. We'll put it down as an experiment that failed. Los Trios Ring Barkers, February 24th to 28th.
Hold on. Experiment that failed. What about those other two guests?
Oh,
You
one
call
was
that
all right.
success?
No, but you're worse than they are. You're duller than they were.
They were a lot funnier.
Yeah, they were a lot
admit
funnier.
that, yeah.
After all, they're politicians, and they're entitled to be funny. One of them was entitled to be funny on the face of it.
Right.
But I know you're good. I know you're excellent. In fact, you've been described as the Three Stooges disguised as two Australians. Is that right?
That's right. The Three Stooges disguised.
Oh, right, okay.
Say that again.
The Three Stooges disguised as Australians.
That's not bad.
Not bad, eh?
Not
There's
bad.
a moonlit neck to neck.
That's not bad either.
And thanks very much for letting us come on your show.
Maybe we could go down the pub later and, down some beers and throw up on the gutter.
That'd be better, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Old
More
Scott's
exciting.
custom. Yeah, you betcha.
What we want to say, sorry, my hand's done something now. What I want to say, though, is that our show is not for young punks.
No.
Right? Now,
It's sophisticated.
what you sort of mentioned there about the new vaudeville is that our show is a visually based show, and that we do sort of draw on things like Chaplin, Keaton, and we put an 80s bent on it. Can you handle that?
Yes, I've got that.
Are you coming to see the show?
No.
Please.
Jack.
No, I will. February 24th, New York Theatre on Commercial Drive. Los Trios Ring Barcus. I'll be back after the break. I hope you enjoyed the two Australian fellows. I've never had to work so hard to fill 7.5 or 8 minutes in my life, and I accept full responsibility for it, all on my own chubby little shoulders. Now, tomorrow, what have we got? Oh, I've got a good one. I've got one of the physicians for social responsibility who's very well informed on the after effects of the Chernobyl affair. The radiation, you all remember the big disaster in the Soviet Union. And I always find that a matter of considerable interest, even though it is a kind of heavy subject. And we're going to have another Tory MP tomorrow night, whom I've never had on, although I should have had on before to see what kind of performance she can make as an MP, because when you think about the Tory party in British Columbia, you can only come across maybe one name. After you've thought about Kearney, you can't think of anybody else. But Mary Collins from North Van is going to be on tomorrow night with me, and whatever else happens for tomorrow at 5 p.m. precisely.